Hey guys, Tim O'Neill here again from Norvise and O'Neill's Fly Fishing. Tonight we're going to tie a old streamer pattern. These patterns were very popular years and years ago, and they've kind of lost popularity in the modern age of fly tying, but they're very effective. They are very easy to tie, and they catch fish anywhere that you throw them. So this is going to be a basic hair wing bucktail. The one that we're going to tie is called the Mickey fin. You've probably seen this before. There is, other than the hook, there's only two materials in this. We have some mylar tinsel for the body, and we're going to be working with bucktail tonight. And if you're going to tie flies, bucktail is a material that you are definitely going to use, and you're definitely going to have to master. So let's get started. Okay, I have a 3X long. This is, I believe, a number 8 hook in my Nor-vise, and I'm using Semperfli's black classic 8/0 thread. So I've got my thread tied on, and I'm going to lay a little bit of thread down, and I'm going to grab my tinsel. Now, this mylar tinsel, typically it will be two colors. So this particular one is gold on one side and it's silver on the other. Okay, so I want the body of this fly is going to be silver. So I want the silver side to show when I wrap it. So when you do that, the side that you want, or the color that you want to show, you want to be down on the shank of the hook. So when I tie this, the silver is going to be down on the shank of the hook, and the gold is going to be facing up. And this will make sense here in a second. So let me get this and get it tied in. Okay. And then I'm just going to follow this back, and I want this to be nice and smooth. When you're working with tinsel, you want your underbody to be as smooth as possible, because the smoother the underbody, the smoother it's going to look when you wrap it. And I'm going to wrap back to a point just right above, so that when my thread hangs down, it's right in line with the barb of the hook. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to work my way back up front, and again, I'm going to take my time on this because I want this underbody to be smooth. Okay, and I'm going to come forward, and here's where I tied in, and I'm going to make sure that I get that down on the shank, nice and even, and I'm going to come up to my tie-in point. Now when I say tie-in point, you have your hook eye here. The diameter of the hook eye, that's about the size or the distance on the shank of the hook that you want to use to build the head of the fly. So you don't want to really encroach into this area until you're ready to finish the fly. So you always want to leave one hook eye diameter of shank empty or bare right at the junction point from where the eye meets the shank of the hook. You want to leave this little bit open so you don't crowd the eye of the hook. So now I'm going to throw a half hitch in here, and I'm going to put my bobbin on the cradle. So now remember when we tied this, and we tied the silver side down on the shank of the hook, when we go to wrap it, we're going to pick it up and we're going to kind of fold it over on itself. Now, if you have a standard static hook vise where the hook doesn't move, you have to take and you have to hand over hand wrap this. So you have to pass the material over top and under the shank of the hook. And that's fine. That's the way that we all learned how to do it. If we're using a rotary vise, or in this case my Nor-vise that you can spin, I can hold the material stationary and I can turn the vise. Now I do have to kind of walk my way around the point of the hook so that I don't cut my material, but once I get past that, I can just hold this at an even tension and see how nice and smooth that is, and we're going to walk this all the way up to our tie-in point. We got a nice smooth underbody, and you see how that was silver. Now, if you wanted it to be gold, you would do the same process, but you would tie the gold portion of the tinsel facing down on the shank of the hook, and then when you wrap the body, it would be gold instead of silver. Okay, now I brought my bobbin back in to the hook, and I'm going to do 3 wraps behind the material, and then I'm going to move the thread in front, and I'm going to do 3 wraps in front of the material. Good tight wraps on there. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to come underneath and I'm going to clip this off right at the base of the hook. And I think I'm going to come in here with my fine point scissors and get another little piece off of there. Just left a little tag in that I couldn't get with my regular scissors. There we go. Okay, so see how nice and smooth that body is? Now we're going to lay our wing down. So the traditional Mickey fin is two colors. It has a yellow portion, a red portion, and then another yellow portion. So the total volume of hair that you want on this particular fly is about the size of a matchstick. So your hair wing on your bucktail would be about the thickness of a wooden matchstick. Now on this particular pattern, we're going to use three colors. If you were using one color, which we do a lot, if it was just going to be white, you would do it the thickness of a matchstick. Being we're going to put three clumps on here, we need to understand that before we start tying. So you can't put three clumps that are the thickness of a matchstick. It's going to be way too much material on the top of the fly. So you want to divide the matchstick up into thirds, so to speak. So here's our yellow bucktail. Okay. This is the area of hair that you want to work with. The stuff here up on the tips is usually not very good. It's usually bent and kinked, and it's just not real good hair to use. The stuff here at the base where the tail meets the body of the deer is usually it starts to get hollow, and it will, if it's hollow, when you pull down on your thread tension, it will flare the hair and it won't lay properly for this particular pattern. So when we're tying streamers, we're going to be on this side here in about the bottom 2/3 of the tail. So when you cut your hair, you're always going to cut to the hide. Okay, so I'm going to pull a small little clump off of here, and I'm going to clip it all the way back to the hide. Now there's my clump that I'm working with. Okay, and what we're going to do, I'm going to pinch it here at the bottom, and we want to get, you can see there's all different lengths of hair on this, in this clump, and we want to get them evened up as possible. So I'm going to pinch it here at the bottom, and I'm just going to take my fingers and I'm going to start kind of pulling out the ones that are longer and get rid of all the long ones. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of pinch it here in the middle, and now I'm going to pull out the shorter ones. Now see what happens? See how all that hair came out? So we want to get, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want it to be roughly as even as possible, which is what we have there. Okay, so now for the length of our wing, I want to go 1.5 times the length of the hook shank. So the hook shank would be from the back of the hook bend to the eye of the hook. Okay, so there's one to about right here, and there's about 1.5. So that's where I'm going to cut my material, right here where my fingers are. So now I'm going to transfer this. This is the length that I want. I'm going to transfer this from my right hand to my left hand, keeping the same spot. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to clip it off down here in my wastebasket. Now I've got that little bit of material sticking out. That's what I'm going to tie in with. And I'm going to lay this right on top of the shank of the hook. And I'm going to do one loose wrap and pull up. And then I'm going to do a medium wrap and pull up. And I'm going to do a hard wrap and pull up. And there's the first section of my wing, the yellow section of wing on the bucktail. Okay, so we're going to repeat that. I've got my red bucktail here. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut down to the hide, and I'm going to cut a small section out. Okay, there's my red. Now I'm going to do the same, just like I did before. I'm going to pinch it at the bottom, and I'm going to kind of run my fingers out and pull the longer hairs out so that the tips are relatively even. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want it to look good. Okay, now I'm going to pinch it in the middle, and I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to run it down the back, and that's going to pull out any of the shorter ones. So we're using the same method on opposite ends of the hair to pull out the hair that is not the right length. And now as I'm looking at that, there's another one that's a little short and he's got to come out of there. Okay, so there is my red section of my wing. So these are all going to be basically the same length. If anything, you want, as you're going up, you want your wing to be a little bit longer. Doesn't have to be, but you definitely don't want the wing shorter than the one that's below it. Okay, so I'm going to use my yellow and I'm going to measure my red just a little bit longer, which is about right there. So I'm going to cut it here. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to transfer from my right to my left hand. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to clip these butt ends off so that they're nice and square and even. And that's going to be my tie-in point for my red right there. So I'm going to lay that right on top of the yellow. And I'm going to do a loose wrap and pull up on it. And I'm going to do a medium wrap and pull up on it. And I want to do a tight wrap and pull up on it. That good and tight. And there is my yellow and my red. Okay. So now one more step. We're going to go back to the yellow bucktail. And I want to do the same thing. We're just repeating these same steps 3 times. Now when I get done, all 3 clumps of this hair are going to be roughly about the thickness of a matchstick. So that's why you have to know that going in. So you can't, you got to know, you know, whatever bulk you want. If you're doing 3 layers on your wing, you've got to divide that by 3. Less is more with these, believe it or not. I was talking about the striper fly that I use. The way that the gentleman that started that invented that fly and started fishing with it, he says you should be able to lay the wing of the fly on a newspaper and you should be able to read the words through the newspaper. Okay, so there's my top wing and it is just a little longer than my red. I'm going to measure it right here. Transfer hands. Cut it off. So now I've got my tie-in point. I'm going to come and I'm going to lay this right on top of the red. So we've got yellow, red, yellow. And I'm going to do a soft wrap and pull up, medium wrap and pull up, and a tight wrap. Okay, and there is my 3-layer bucktail wing. Now you may notice as I was tying these, after I tied the red one on top of the first yellow one and then the yellow, it kind of pushed the one yellow one down, and I don't really want that. So what we can do is we're going to take all 3 of these wings, I'm going to pick them up, and I'm going to take my bobbin and I'm just going to put a couple of wraps of thread underneath the wing, and that will act like a little kind of prop, if you will, and it'll hold that bottom wing up. Okay, now this would be a good time to put just a little dab of glue right here, because all of this is going to get covered up. I'm going to put just a little dab of glue right there, and that'll kind of keep the thread wraps and keep the butts of the thread when we wrap it up. It's going to be good and durable. And now I'm just going to start wrapping the head of my fly. I'm going to work my way forward, and we're going to cover up all of this bucktail with the black thread. And again, you want your thread head to be just about the size of the diameter of the eye of the hook. And that looks about good to me. Okay, so now we're going to come in with our half hitch tool, which is the little dimple that's in the back of our bodkin. And we're going to do a couple, 2 or 3 or 4 series. Good tight half hitches. Okay. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to clip this thread off the bottom. Okay, we got one more step that we're going to do. On these old classic style bucktails, typically we will use a head cement to kind of make the head, it'll make it a glossy kind of black finish. So I've got a little bit of head cement down here, and we're just going to I'm going to paint that on there, and you'll see what this does. It gives it a nice finished look. Don't get any in the eye, and if you do, you're going to have to take it out. Okay. And we'll just use our vise to spin that a little bit. It'll take it a little while to cure, but just don't touch the head at this point and just let it dry on its own. But there is a classic Mickey fin bucktail.